even if it's shortcuts or somewhere.
Let's see, we have Sandra in?
She's sitting out there, but she'll be in a second. Yeah.
Oh boy. It sounds like a hot mic. You can hear me okay?
Yeah.
Is it me yelling or is it the microphone?
It's you yelling.
Okay. Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Welcome everyone. I am here to get us started. My name is Stephen Warren. I'm a current board member of the Historical Society of Western Virginia and also served as past president, and knew from my service several years ago the late George Kegley, for whom this lecture series is named after. And George was a stalwart here at the museum. More than that, his wife was a founding member and George was an original member. I understand in talking with Sandra Kelly that because George worked at the newspaper at that time, he could not somehow be a member or a charter member because of restrictions. If you were a lead reporter, as he was for many, many years, you had to watch your associations in the community. You had to be in the community, but you had to be careful where you signed up for things because it could compromise your ability to write the news fairly. But George was quite fair if you knew the man. So I don't think that would ever have been an issue with him, but nonetheless, George Kegley passed in February of last year, 2022, and just the kindest gentleman you'd ever know. He was very kind to me, certainly. And so that's who this lecture series is named after, and it's just an honor and a privilege to continue the tradition post-pandemic, if you will. We had a real tough time continuing these lectures when the pandemic struck. We've had several. We tried doing the Zoom thing, and we found that there are limitations to that. We hope to get back to Zoom, maybe as an adjunct to the face-to-face. But for right now, we're just excited as we can possibly be to be back face-to-face with the Kegley Lecture Series. Now, generally, you may know this series to take place at Christ Lutheran Church, and starting next month, that's where we will return. But I sort of caught them off guard, not having been over there for lectures for the past several years, and they weren't ready for us. They have something booked this month, and so we will be back there next month. Tonight, though, we're so excited to have Ms. Trish White-Boyd talk to us on Roanoke's Hidden Histories, the Hidden in Plain Sight project. I want to welcome all members of the History Museum and Historical Society tonight, and as well as guests. And I want to speak for a minute about membership in the Society. I brought this brochure up, and I promised that I would. It's important to me, certainly as a past president and a current board member, to make a pitch for membership. And the reason why it's important to sell the idea of membership is it supports a vital function in the community, and that is the organizations which are preserving and telling the story of Roanoke and Roanoke's history. It's very cheap. It costs $40 a year for an individual and $60 for the family. And if you look at the value of what's included in that, there's a once-a-year journal, which is, I think, a retail value of $15 or $20. And these lectures, while they're free tonight, will be there will be an admission charge starting at the return to Christ Lutheran, and we're not sure what that is. It's somewhere around $5. So if you go to enough lectures, your membership will cover that. So in addition to that, there are discounts at the gift shop, and there's opportunities to get first tickets to various events. So we're still working on new ideas for revitalizing our membership package, but for right now, I promise you we want to make it sweet, and we will give you 2 free books from our gift shop that we've selected. One is the Claire White History of Roanoke, and the other is a book on the, help me out, is it on Lewis and Clark? Thank you very much. So that's my brief pitch for membership. And I also want to talk a minute about sponsorships. Tonight's lecture is not sponsored, but it could have been. In other words, we are looking for sponsors for the Kegley Lectures, and if you are knowledgeable of a business or entity that would like to sponsor our lectures, please get in touch with us. So I mentioned Christ Lutheran. That's the site of our upcoming lectures. Next month on March 28th, we're going to have preservationists Allison Blanton and Ann Beckett. And they're going to speak on the city cemetery and its connection to early Roanoke history. Now there's several cemetery stories going around. You're going to hear one tonight. It's not the one we're talking about next month. And I know that Joe Cobb talks about, I think, the one that you're going to mention tonight. So there's several people talking about cemeteries. What we're going to talk about next month is the cemetery behind the rescue mission. I'm pretty sure that's the city cemetery that was connected to the early churches, and that's one of the angles that they're going to explore. On April 25th, we have Ted Carroll, who will present highlights from his 4-volume series, Echoes from Catawba. And that series is a compilation of stories about growing up in Catawba in the 1900s. To my knowledge, there's no real significant history series on the Catawba area, so this may be the first and only. So join us in April for that one. And then as we close the year out, our shortened first year return, it's going to be May 23rd. We have Dr. Mills Kelly of George Mason University, who will bring his new book from History Press entitled Virginia's Lost Appalachian Trail, which recounts the original trail system that went through our area in the 1930s and 40s. That book just came out, and you may have seen Dan Casey writing about that in the Roanoke Times just the other day. So we're excited to get him in, and then we take a little summer break, and we'll resume our lecture series in the fall. So we're still lining up those speakers. All right. Now, speaking of speakers, I want to introduce ours. It was more than exciting to find out about this project, and even more than exciting to call Ms. White-Boyd and have her answer the phone promptly and say, I would like to bring this to your group. I was not sure when I signed up to volunteer as a coordinator of these lectures in this spring season that we were going to have. I wasn't sure what we were going to find as far as available speakers. I thought certainly for Black History Month, how am I going to find someone? Everyone's already found everyone who's got a story to tell. And then I saw this story emerging, and I realized that we are really on the early edge of this story. It's going to really happen this May. She's going to tell us about this, but the fact that she's here tonight giving us a sneak preview is just amazing. She comes to us from what I believe will be the first public unveiling or sneak preview of her special project. Her presentation tonight is entitled Hidden in Plain Sight, Roanoke Experiences. She will tell us about the conditions and events which led to the destruction of so much of the history and human connection in the Black community, particularly during the mid-century period known as urban renewal. She will describe how she came to partner with various community volunteers and stakeholders to reclaim this lost history. And she will also share with us the latest information about her group's upcoming documentary to be presented this spring at the Dumas Hotel. The Hidden in Plain Sight team in Roanoke is headed by Miss White-Boyd, with credit to the Harrison Museum of African American Culture, which serves as its fiscal agent and support system. As background on our speaker, Ms. White-Boyd grew up in Chipley, Florida. She is a graduate of Averett University. She and her family have lived here in Roanoke since 1984. She has been very active in the community as a parent, volunteer, small business owner, and civic leader. Ms. White-Boyd has been an advocate for education within the Roanoke City Schools and was appointed to serve on the Roanoke Higher Education Authority by Governor McAuliffe. She has dedicated much of her attention to aging and senior issues, having served on the board of the local area on aging. She owns and operates Blue Ridge Senior Services of Roanoke and remains active in several organizations, including the NAACP and the Roanoke City Democratic Committee. In the field of local politics, Ms. White-Boyd is known for her skill as an activist and community organizer. She was appointed to City Council in 2019, and the next year she was elected as Roanoke's Vice Mayor, where she is actively involved today. One of her passions is helping to bring overlooked history to life, and in her time on City Council, she has helped bring increasing awareness of Roanoke's hidden histories. She has been central to the community's effort to honor Henrietta Lacks as a one-time Roanoke, a woman whose life and death would be immortalized by global research into life-saving treatments for cancer, as well as the study of the human genome, viruses, vaccine development, and more. I hope this brief background has given you a good idea of what we're about to learn from our speaker. So without further ado, I present Ms. Trish White-Boyd.
I want you guys to be able to see the, because I'm not going to be extemporaneous, I will tell you that now. I'm going to be using my notes, but I want you to be able to see the screen without obstruction. Can you? You can. Okay, good. So thank you, Stephen, for that introduction. Can I get a copy of that and use that?
You got it.
That was quite lovely. Thank you so much. I just want to say thank you so much for the opportunity to be here tonight to share with you about the project Hidden in Plain Sight. I sat down and I didn't notice we got quite a few folks here now. When I sat down, it was like 3 of us here, but really we've got a good turnout, so this is really exciting. I just want you to know that this project to me is really, really important because it gives us the opportunity to talk about Roanoke's dismal, painful history. And it was dismal and it was painful. Of course, Roanoke is not unique, right? This happened all across the country. So stories like these are similar everywhere. But I want to highlight what has happened here in Roanoke City. And I'm not a native, as you heard. I grew up in Florida, but I've been here since 1984. But I'm going to tell you the impetus for me doing Hidden in Plain Sight Roanoke. I was on Facebook, and sometimes we are on Facebook, just browsing around, and I saw Hidden in Plain Sight Richmond. And I knew the young man that did that. He's a friend of mine. And I called him and I said, Dean, that was really interesting what you did with Hidden in Plain Sight Richmond. And what came to mind was Lumpkin's Jail. Lumpkin's Jail in Richmond housed the slaves as they were being traded. And it's 3 blocks from the Capitol. So if you don't know that, or you didn't know that history, you walk by that history every day. So it's kind of a play on words, right? Hidden in Plain Sight. Seneca Village in New York, another one, right? So Seneca Village was a prosperous black neighborhood in New York. But guess what? They needed green space. And you would not believe what this green space is or was. Yeah, I heard it. Central Park. They got rid of an entire community using eminent domain because New York City needed green space. And that space is called Seneca Village. And these are the stories that you see when you're looking at Hidden in Plain Sight. So everybody, I mean, like I said, this is not unique to us. This is all over the country. And I guess I'm supposed to say, oh, you're out, thank you, yes. So urban renewal actually began with the Housing Act of 1945. And during this time, the U.S. government set aside $1 billion in federal funds to improve their housing infrastructure. Now, in 1949, $1 billion was a lot of money. A lot of money. So, next slide. So there are many names used to describe this destruction. Urban renewal, gentrification, Negro removal is one I just heard used by Dr. Woody Reed in Blacksburg. Slum clearance, urban development. These are just a few. But I will tell you that the actual system that we use, the bureaucratic name used to connect those funds that I just mentioned from the Housing Act of 1945 in Virginia was called the Commonwealth Project. Has anyone heard of the Commonwealth Project? That was the project that we used here in Virginia, and in particular in Roanoke, to funnel this money in to the localities. Next slide. So this is what President Truman said after signing it. He said, this is far-reaching measure. It is a far-reaching measure. He said, but it's of great significance to the welfare of the American people. It opens up the prospect of decent homes, wholesome surroundings, and it especially helps low-income families now living in squalor and in the slums. It equips the federal government for the first time with effective means of aiding cities in the vital task of clearing slums and rebuilding blighted areas. I take deep satisfaction in the successful conclusion of the long fight for this legislation. He was so proud. The task before us now is to put this legislation into operation with the speed and effectiveness. Let's get it done, right? Furthermore, since the low-rent housing and slum clearance programs depend upon local initiatives, I urge state and local authorities to act speedily. Let's hurry up and get this done. I mean, if they went, wow, all this $1 billion, we gotta get it done. This legislation permits us to take a long step toward increasing the well-being and happiness of millions of fellow citizens. So let's not delay in fulfilling the high purpose. Those are not my words, that was our president, Truman. And of course, we didn't waste time here. Urban renewal reared its ugly head in Roanoke around 1955, when the city declared Northeast as blighted, claiming eminent domain on an entire neighborhood. The City Council resolution cited the Housing Act of 1949, which provided funds for this so-called blighted areas. This slum and blight conditions in Northeast are detrimental to the safety, health, and welfare of the people of Roanoke, according to the resolution. Neighborhoods were destroyed to make room for the Roanoke Civic Center, the main post office, white-owned industry hotels, fast food restaurants, and businesses, and of course 581. But I was telling someone earlier that I found 3 of the resolutions, and I just want to read a part of it because it's amazing to see this history in black and white. So this is the resolution that declared Northeast blighted. And it says, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, I won't dare do that to you, but I want to read some of the important sections of it. It says, whereas the City of Roanoke Development and Housing Authority has prepared a redevelopment plan for the project number URVA-71, or the Commonwealth Redevelopment Project, involving approximately 83.5 acres of land situated in Northeast Roanoke City, and has submitted said plan to council for its consideration and approval and authorization. Whereas council in turn has submitted said plan to the City Planning Commission for study and consideration, and said Planning Commission has approved the same with certain suggested modifications and alterations, and whereas presently advised and inclined to favor authorizing the City of Roanoke Development and Housing Authority to cause said plan to be effectuated, provided a contract protective of the city's interest and acceptable to the authority, it is first drafted and approved by council. Therefore, be it resolved by the council of the City of Roanoke as follows: Walter L. Young and Roy L. Weber. I remember the florist, Roy L. Weber, had no idea he signed this resolution. Remember Roy Weber, florist? Was on council as well. Rand Whittle, Arthur S. Owen, and Harry Yates. Does anybody recognize any of these names? These guys were on council when this resolution was done. So, be it, such committee is hereby appointed to draft and propose a contract between the City of Roanoke Redevelopment and Housing Authority and the City of Roanoke, providing for a redevelopment plan for the project, the Commonwealth Project, involving approximately 83.5 acres of land. So that was the resolution, and it's just really good to see it in black and white. That was the resolution that was signed by our Roanoke City Council that considered Northeast as blighted. And I talked to a young lady today who lived in that area. We were just actually at the nail salon. But anyway, she was chatting about that area and what happened. And she said, it just really disturbs a lot of black people to this day. They're still very angry, very hurt, very frustrated, because I think most of us realize that that was not blighted area. There might have been one or two homes, just like now, one or two homes that are not in the best of conditions, especially in Northeast and, Southeast and Northwest, but that community was not blighted. However, it was prime opportunity for now I-581 to bring in big business, and it did bring in big business, and it boosted the economy, but it was a detriment to the black community. Residents and business owners witnessed firefighters burning over 100 homes or more in one area and over 1,000 in total in Northeast. It was pretty much leveled to the ground. Henry Street totally destroyed, and we'll go to the next project. But before I go to the next slide and talk about the impact, I want to read you a quote from Mary Pickett, who was also on City Council. And I think that may be up there, but I'll go ahead and read it. Mary Pickett, a former Roanoke City Council member, was quoted by Mary Bishop, and I don't know if you all know Mary Bishop or not, but wonderful, wonderful writer for the Roanoke Times. She was a reporter for the Roanoke Times, and she was retired when she did this project. But she managed to catch up with Mary Pickett 40 years after urban renewal, and her position was still very strong. She said, 40 years later, it had to be done for the good of the city, for the good of the future. Their kids were growing up in slum conditions. That was prime growth land. Some people had to suffer. They just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, according to Miss Mary Pickett. And that was the mentality. 40 years later, when most of us had come to terms with it, or most people had come to terms with it, she was still saying, hey, this is something that just had to be done. But I don't want to go into a whole lot of details, because I do want to save the documentary. I want you all to see the documentary. But Hidden in Plain Sight Committee had a long list of impacted areas that would be impacted by urban renewal, but we decided on 6. The first one being the Berglund Center. Over 1,000 homes were systematically destroyed in the name of the Commonwealth Project. So if you didn't grow up here and you just moved to Roanoke City, you see the Berglund Center and you say, oh, that's a nice Berglund Center, but you see Site 1, it's a neighborhood. And it was pretty much leveled to the ground because we had to funnel some of that money in through the Commonwealth Project from that big old urban, they call it the Urban Renewal Project of 1949, where all that $1 billion went all throughout the country. The next would be Old Lick Cemetery. So for those of you who are not familiar with Old Lick Cemetery, if you're at the Berglund Center, in fact, you can see the Berglund Center. It's right directly across the street from it. They literally dug up almost 1,000 individuals, relocating them to Botetourt County in Conyer Springs. Can you imagine, now, having a funeral, and you know the process to get one gravesite ready, right? You know the task, how daunting that is. Can you imagine having to do almost 1,000? Not just digging them up, but burying them down the road in Botetourt County. Well, we had to get 581 done. We had to get ready for progress. But in their haste, they didn't even bother to name these individuals. They don't even know who they are. They still, to this day, are trying to figure out who these individuals are. Somebody's aunt, somebody's uncle, somebody's mother, somebody's father, 90% African American, but it was in the way. And I can understand, okay, well, you're going to do whatever you want to do anyway. You want to move these bodies out of the way. We got to make way for Orange Avenue and 581. But can you not at least have a system to unearth these bodies and bury them someplace else? These are individuals. These are someone's family members. They didn't do that. And I won't get too far into it because, like I said, I'm going to save some for the documentary. The next one would be BURRELL Hospital. So for 50 years, the only hospital in Roanoke that would even treat black patients was BURRELL Hospital, right here in Roanoke City. But it wasn't always there. Roanoke, I mean, it's just baffling. But BURRELL Hospital was derived out of a tragedy, so to speak. It was named after Dr. Isaac David Burrell, who was a physician here in Roanoke City. He had his own practice, but he came down with a gallbladder infection that needed to be treated. And of course, he was not going to be treated at Roanoke Memorial, Carilion, or any other hospital because they were not allowing blacks to be treated in those hospitals. So he got on a train, probably in excruciating pain. I know my mother had a gallbladder infection. They sent her home, misdiagnosed her, and my sister called me and said she had to take her back. She was in the floor of the car, in the back seat of the car, in that much pain, going back to the hospital. It's very painful. So he had to ride, I think they said 250 miles on a train to Washington, D.C., where he could be treated for that. And shortly after the surgery, he died. So they brought his body back to Roanoke to be buried. But 5 other physicians got together. They were so devastated by what happened to Dr. Burrell that they got together, 5 of them, and started BURRELL Memorial Hospital that was around for decades. And that's the only place that blacks in this area, not just Roanoke, but in this area, in this region, had until we were allowed to go to the other hospitals. But that was pretty tragic, and thank God for those other physicians who came together to start BURRELL Memorial Hospital. And you know now that's, right now Carilion owns it. But it has had, you know, many different hands, but that's what it looked like. It was a very nice hospital with 5 black physicians who were treating folks around this region. And our next site that we decided on was Henry Street. Now Henry Street is dense. There's a lot going on there. It was once a very thriving black business district. It was also known as First Street Northwest, which served as the commercial and entertainment center for African Americans in Roanoke during the first half of the 20th century. And of course, during the days of Jim Crow and segregation. So this is where the blacks went for entertainment. They shop, they dine. You know, that's pretty small. You might not be able to read it. That was the only one I could find. But they had pharmacies. I mean, it was a self-sustaining neighborhood. I think when I moved here, they were calling it the Yard. And they called it the Yard for a long time. It was like the Yard, you know, this is where we all go. And unfortunately, that gave way to urban renewal as well, because they needed that area. And the only thing that's still standing there is the Dumas Hotel. Of course, the Claude Moore Complex. I'm not sure if you all are familiar with the Claude Moore Complex. That is there now in place of it. But the Dumas Hotel is still there. That is one edifice that's still standing. But of course, now we have the Roanoke Higher Ed. All of that area used to be Henry Street. And you had all of these black businesses. So it was just easy for the Commonwealth Project to get rid of these businesses. I mean, they weren't going to, you know, dare touch any of the white-owned businesses, so it was just easier to take them from the black community and use eminent domain. And the fourth one, actually this is going to be my fifth one, is Dreamland. Look at that. Dreamland was a swimming pool and a dance hall, a place to play, a place to relax, a place to escape from the heat, because of course you know they weren't allowed to go to any of the other white facilities. But that gave way to Orange Avenue. Needed to be white. So guess what they take? Dreamland, the place where the blacks had to go and dance and swim. You know, we couldn't go to any of the other places. So looked like they were having a good time there. But of course we needed progress, right? Needed Orange Avenue. Now we've got the YWCA, you know, right there on the corner. And I would certainly be remiss if I didn't tell you about Washington Park dump. Right across the street from it. That was a dump. Now it is called Washington Park, and the city is in the process. We've allocated funds to revitalize that, to renovate it, and we're holding our breath, right? Because we're afraid the EPA is going to say, you can't do it. You know, so we don't know how far down we've got to go to level it. So we're just, you guys say a little prayer, because we really would like to revitalize it, but we're afraid because it was a dump. You know, they just turned it into a dump. It's just, you know, some of this stuff is just madness, but anyway. And then our last and final site is Henrietta Lacks. And this one is really exciting for me because I knew the cousin, and she told me this was her cousin, but I didn't know what she was talking about. I didn't know who Henrietta Lacks was. This was in 1993. And we worked together, and she said, you know, her name is Regine Pleasance, and she was here when we did the unveiling of the conceptual drawing. She came from South Carolina, and she said, I told you that was my cousin, you know, back then, 1993. That was actually her cousin. It was her grandfather and Henrietta Lacks' father were brothers and sisters. I mean, were brothers. But anyway, we discovered Henrietta Lacks lived here in Roanoke, and people knew it, but not very many. So I decided we need to make sure that people know about Henrietta Lacks. There was a book written by Rebecca Sklutz about Henrietta Lacks and the HeLa cells. But Henrietta Lacks was a black woman that was born in Roanoke, Virginia. And she lived right there in that house. And the city demolished it, but it was not their fault. They had no idea that was her home, or we would have probably made arrangements to preserve it like we've done any other home, or at least put a marker there. They didn't realize it was her home, so that's what you see currently is an empty lot. But Henrietta Lacks was, they named it HeLa cells because of her name, Henrietta Lacks. They were discovered by Dr. Gay at Johns Hopkins after a culture was done. And, you know, everybody, you know, was all upset saying, you know, that it was done without her permission. You know, back then it was not uncommon for a doctor to take your culture and not know it. It's not legal now, but it wasn't illegal then. And they did. They took that culture, and they were surprised because the nurse came back a week later and said, Dr. Gay is still living and multiplying. 2 weeks later, still living and multiplying. Today, still living and multiplying. It is the only immortal cell that they have found to this day. It was used for the polio vaccine. That's why we no longer have, you know, issues with polio. Her cell was responsible for the polio vaccine. Of course, it was used for COVID too. They used it to experiment on COVID vaccines because that's what you use now. You use the HeLa cell. And anybody who's done or been in med school, because I've talked to a lot of doctors, they said, yeah, that's the cell that we used when we were in med school, you know, doing research. They're still using that cell today. And I know if you watched the news, you saw Ben Crump was here in Roanoke with us in December with the family. You know, he's representing the family now. He's suing the pharmaceutical companies because, you know, that family has not ever received a dime. You know, they're just regular people living in an apartment in Baltimore, Maryland right now. So Ben Crump, a civil rights attorney, has taken up that cause. But, you know, there's a lot to be said about these sites. And I can see in the future, I don't know if it'll be Trish White Boy, but I can see in the future other sites that are hidden that people would want to know about. So I tried to give you just some idea about the documentary, because really this is about the documentary. And you know, I promised them I wouldn't give a whole lot of details because we want you to see the documentary. It will be done around May, and it will be shown at the Dumas Hotel. That will be the first stop, because that's a historic hotel. It's a wonderful theater. If you've not been there, it's a wonderful theater. It will be done there. It's going to be free. We were so fortunate, and this is another thing that really warms my heart. When I thought about doing this project, it was just some friends. I said, hey, I would like to do this project. I saw it hidden in plain sight, Richmond. I would like to do something similar in Roanoke. Would you guys help me raise some money? It was just a group of people, no organization. We're not an organization, just a group of people, and that's why we had to ask the Harrison if they would keep our money. You know, we had to have someone act as fiscal agent because we wanted people to be able to get tax write-offs. Our goal was $160,000. In the first meeting, you know, everybody was all, you know, flabbergasted, like $160,000. Well, during a pandemic, we raised $183,000. And that just tells you the significance and the importance of the project and what we were doing. And so with the extra 20+ thousand, we're going to show this documentary for free. You know, we'll have some refreshments, some wine if you like it. It's going to be catered. We're going to do it really, really nice because that's how important this documentary is for us. We're going to do it at the Grandin Theater after the Dumas. I'm not sure the order. We meet next Tuesday. I'm not sure the order. I do know that the first one will be at the Dumas Hotel. I do know that. We will do it at the Grandin. We were going to do it at the Jefferson Center. We've got people working with the contacts at all of these locations. And Dave Trinkle is one of the people who helped me get money from Carillion, $25,000. So they're going to do it at the Virginia Tech Biomedical Center for the students. And Dave told me, you know, he said, well, Dr. Trinkle, he said, you know, we're excited. And he said, Nancy Agee is so excited. So she called me and she said, we're going to get you some money. We're going to get you some money because we want to use this as onboarding for our medical students and for our employees to let them see where they live, the surrounding, and give them this information. She said, I think it's important for people to know the area that they live in and they're working in. So, you know, that was one of the reasons that they gave a large, sizable donation. Of course, Roanoke City did. We got money from AEP. I mean, we got several large donations. And it was, and a lot of small ones. We got checks from Richmond, from Florida, from Floyd County, $10, $5, you know, and it really was exciting for me to go to the post office and get these checks from all over the place because it just tells us that people do care about this history. They do care about these stories. And we were able to do it during a pandemic. So when you see the list, and it will be, I'm sure, published all over the place, we're going to make sure that people know when these documentaries are, when the documentary is just one now, when it is going to be shown because we want people to come and we want people to see it. I hope it's as good as the one that I saw in Richmond. I don't know yet. I haven't seen very much of it. They've been very, you know, very tight with it, and I had to be sworn to secrecy, and that's the reason I wasn't able to share a whole lot tonight. But I hope that I have shared enough that you will be motivated to come to see it when it's shown in an area near you. And that concludes my presentation. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions if you have any. I don't know how long that took me.
Questions? I see a hand.
They said they took it by eminent domain. Did they pay them just the going value for the property, or did they just take
well,
it?
some of it they just took because the housing authority, and you know, Mary Bishop, I give her all the credit for all of her research. She went and talked to a lot of the people in that community. She did a lot of research, and she has a lot of articles written through the Roanoke Times. The housing authority lost a lot of the deeds. So when you lose the deeds and you don't have the deed to your home, you can't even prove that you own it. It was just very ugly. It was very ugly. It's just very ugly. And Mary, if you don't know Mary, very reputable reporter. And she did an excellent job, and she's still very passionate. And you know, a lot of the elders, we call them elders in the black community, they're still so hurt and so angry. I mean, I guess I would probably feel the same way. I mean, they just took, and you know, you saw this, they had big fires going to burn them down because they needed to level it. So they took a lot of them by eminent domain. Some of them they may have paid for if you were fortunate enough to have your deed. But, and some of it was rental property. So according to Mary, it was very mixed. Some were paid for and some just all of a sudden they couldn't find their deeds. And you know, a lot of those homes were purchased through the Roanoke Redevelopment and Housing Authority, and they were key in the urban renewal, the Commonwealth Project. You see that City Council made the pact with them to do this, and it was 83 acres initially. That's a lot of.
So those people had to be absorbed at just one time, like.
Yeah, and they were scattered all over the city, and Mary even talks about that. She talked about how you wouldn't even. I mean, it was a close-knit community, just like any community. And she said they would not even see each other. Every now and then you might run into somebody at a funeral or something. Can you imagine if people just being dispersed like that throughout the city as best they could in projects here and there? Because it was, you can see, I mean, it's like, this is the way it needs to go. The 581 needs to go right here. Orange Avenue needs to be widened. You know, we can't, the horse and buggy was okay, but now we have cars. We need to widen it. You know, just wipe out a rec center, the only one that the black people had. It's just,
I remember that article series. Sandra, do you remember what year Mary wrote that?
Well, she covered it over a long period of time.
Yeah, she had. There's several.
There was one big segment that stretched out over several issues, and I think didn't she win an award for that?
Oh, she should have.
Multiple awards.
And you can Google Mary Bishop and just read some of those articles that were written by her in the Roanoke Times.
Well, it led to Roanoke, her story about Roanoke being included as one of 3 cities. I think Pittsburgh was another. I can't remember the other, in a book that came out called
Root Shot. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Excellent book, Root Shot. If you don't have Root Shot or haven't read it, read that. And it talks about Roanoke, and it doesn't say a whole lot in it, but it does mention us in that book.
Any other questions? Yes, in the back.
What's in store for Washington Park? You didn't say.
Well, we are, if you ride by it right now, you'll see the men working. They're digging out the old pool. So we want to put a brand new pool and a brand new center. It's so old, it was leaking. And so, you know, we have allocated money to redo it. But, you know, the city manager is like really worried because it's hilly. Because, you know, most dumps are. Are you familiar with Mount Trashmore in Norfolk, in that area, that Tidewater area? Same thing, right? Same thing. So it's very hilly, and it really needs to be leveled off, but we don't know how far down we can go before we reach that area that's not good. So we hope that we can. And if we're good, it will be a new center there. It will be a new pool, a new rec center. It will be very nice. We've got really good plans for it. So we're just trying to get the old pool out and tear down the old building and start to level it to see where we are. If we can't do it there, we'll have to rethink it, because that community is going to be devastated if we can't put it back there, because we'll have to put it in another part of the city which will not benefit that area which we are trying to currently serve.
I went to Virginia Tech and worked in this area years ago, and the jobs took me all over the country, and I came back here to retire about 6 years ago and read Beth Macy's book, True Vine, and then I began to hear things like, during Jim Crow, Roanoke was divided into 4 quarters. African Americans could only live in 1 quarter. Is that true?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, I thought so.
Absolutely, and it's still very segregated, and we are trying our best now not to. You know, that's the first things people ask when you move. Where do you live? If you say South Roanoke, it's like, ooh. You know, Northwest, oh well, you know. Southeast, you know, you poor thing. We're still very segregated. And I was talking to Wendy about the redlining
Oh, yeah.
We were talking up front.
Yeah, because I have a friend who does title searches, and we were watching a movie once, and she, it was some friends of mine, some white friends, and this was 4 or 5 years ago before, Donald Trump started talking about Tulsa. He thought he discovered the Tulsa massacre, but he did not. So we were talking about that, and they said, I never heard of that. So I decided every month I would show some stories at my house, just so that they would understand some of the frustration that black people had or whatever. And we did one on redlining, and Elizabeth Warren was talking about how strategic it was and how it wasn't just the banks, it was the government. They were all working in tandem to X out certain people, and they were like, you cannot sell to anybody in this area, and it was on the deeds, and you just could not. You could not even resell to a black person because it was just that strict. That red line was serious. And Roanoke has come a long way. I think we're a very progressive city. I think we're doing some really good things, but we do have that dismal past, and people really have a hard time getting past it, just like Evan Springs, and I will use that for an example. There are about 100 acres in Northwest called Evan Springs, and it is owned by white people. But the black community is so adamant about not losing that green space that any developer that comes in, they shut it down. They protest, they call it, they march by our houses. It's like, you can't take our land. Unfortunately, it's not their land because they don't own it. But they have created this hostile environment that developers are not really interested anymore in that particular area. But it would benefit them in the long run, but they're so hurt, and this is what that young lady and I were talking about today earlier. They're still so hurt that they can't see past that they don't want anything else taken from them. And I had Mary call me. Yeah, what's going on with Evan Springs? Because she lived through that, she wrote about it. She said, Trish, and I tried to explain to her as best I could, but she feels the same way they do. Like, don't take that land from them, but they don't own that land. So developers are now looking at Southeast. We have a big project coming in Southeast, $50 million. The city is going to loan Ed Walker to develop that warehouse area over, I'm sure you've seen it in the paper.
The Fisco's plant.
Yes. So we're excited about that. It's like growing. It's like, that community needs that. Just like Northwest, these are two areas that really need that growth. I would like to see the same thing in Northwest, but they are so, they're just so hurt now that they're not really receptive to that kind of progress. They don't want anything happening. They just want to just leave us alone, pretty much.
Well, and since that time, I've been in a number of book groups studying about racial justice here in Roanoke. And I just don't understand why our mailing addresses continue to have those southeast, southwest. To me, that is just a reminder of something in the past that was unjust. And
I guess they got to figure out what direction to send the mailman. I live in Northwest. I live in Round Hill. We have the best view in the city. Beautiful. I don't know if you've ever been up there, Round Top Road and Grandview. They call it Grandview for a reason. Beautiful neighborhood. I love it there. I live there by choice.
Any other questions for the?
I was just, I'm sorry. I was just going to go back to what you said about the deeds that forbid sales to African Americans. Those existed, and South Roanoke was a big area that had that in its deeds.
Yeah, of course, you wouldn't go mess up that nice neighborhood.
Just out of curiosity, do you know if anybody's taken charge or who is the cemetery that's still standing, what's left of it?
There's a group that they're volunteers. They maintain it. I saw daffodils coming up. There's a group that goes out about once a month to clean it. There's probably about 10 graves there. I don't know how they got missed, but the mass grave was about 960.
Those graves weren't marked with people's names on them?
Well, they weren't marked until they dug them up and moved them.
Wow.
Yeah, and you're right. There are a lot of people working on that, still working on that project, trying to identify the names. But all these years, it's.
Wendy?
Yeah, I was just going to add that I heard a presentation by Joe Cobb a couple months ago about the Coiner Springs location where that cemetery is and how they're trying, they've got a monument, they're raising money to.
Yeah, and they're still trying. I mean, I don't fault them. I mean, that's good. I'm glad they're trying. I just can't imagine how daunting of a task that would be to try to go and identify some graves. I mean, they were in a hurry, they had to get it done, so they just, and that was a lot. Like I said, I kind of preface it by saying, when you're having a funeral, the preliminary work that you have to do to dig one grave, that big ordeal. Can you imagine doing that for 900 plus, almost 1,000 bodies?
So I have one maybe closing question, and
Sure,
that is, you
sure.
brought up the Henrietta Lacks.
Yes.
Can you give us a brief update on
Yes,
the statue and the plaza?
I'm happy to do that. So, in 2019, might have been 2019, we renamed Lee Plaza. It was the entire plaza was Lee Plaza. So we renamed it Lax Plaza and the other half Freedom Plaza. And so Freedom Plaza is the side where the monuments are for the war heroes, the Korean War, and it was, I'm not sure if the Vietnam War. But anyway, those monuments will remain on that side, and we have renamed that Freedom Plaza. The other side, where Lee Monument was, is now renamed Lax Plaza, and this is where Henrietta Lax's statue will go. So the majority of the funds were for the statue, and not just the documentary. It was for the statue. And Larry Bechtel is a sculptor who lives in Blacksburg. He has actually done several. He did the fallen soldiers in front of the police department. You see the guy, he has done that one. He's going to be doing Henrietta Lacks, and I'm going to go see the maquette actually next Wednesday. So we're getting very close. He said that we are looking at perhaps unveiling in the fall. So we're trying to get the documentary done and everybody get through the documentary and lead up to the unveiling of her statue around October, maybe as early as September. But I was telling everybody, the family who came down for the unveiling of the conceptual drawing, that we were looking at October because they intend to come back. The family will be back. So sometime this fall.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys for letting me have a share.
So if you'll indulge us just for one more minute before we let you go, I reversed the order accidentally of Ashley's pitch, but we want to just give you a few minutes of an overview of what's happening at the museum today.
I'll be really quick. So we have 2 new exhibits up. If you haven't seen them yet, they will be up until May 6th. They are both Art of Place. One is Railroad and the Art of Place, and the other one is a local landscape show with 4 local artists. So those are in the Radford Gallery and the Trackside Gallery. If you have not seen them, again, they'll be up until May 6th. Brett Legoo is our artist in residence, and he's actually painting in the galleries now for Art of Place. So come back Tuesdays and Wednesdays or every other Saturday and see him. March 22nd, the photographer David Kaler in the Radford Gallery, he's actually coming to speak here at the museum, all on his Railroad and the Art of Place, and I won't give you too much detail about that. You can look that up online. And then finally, we have 2 camera workshops coming up March 25th and April 1st. Those are directly related to the Art of Place exhibition. So if you want to learn more about how to use your camera, we've got Rural Art of Place. So that's going to be April 1st. That one's going to be going out to Bent Mountain and taking photographs. And then we've got Urban Art of Place, and that one's March 25th. And that's going to be walking around downtown. We do have the Henrietta Lacks book in our gift shop, so if you are interested in learning more about her, please stop in the gift shop on your way out.
And we have, look for an announcement on the return of the tours, the bus tour. And so we have more news coming. I won't try and get into that now because I'll mess it up. But seriously, we're going to bring back the bus tour, and so we're looking forward to that as well.
And we will also have somebody at the gift shop if you were interested in becoming a member. You can check out there as well. So.
Gas mask.
Oh, and vote for our gas mask! So our World War I gas mask has now made it to Virginia Association of Museums Endangered Artifact. And so on your way out, check out the gas mask. scan the QR code, vote for it. Voting ends March 3rd. We are eligible to get between $250 to $1,000. I don't think we're going to get the $1,000 for conservation, but it definitely needs it. So please vote every day, every 24 hours until March 3rd. Thank you.
Thanks again, Trish.
Oh, absolutely.